I've recently been seeing a lot of videos on my YouTube recommended talking about the analog horror series The Painter by UrbanSPOOK. Most of, if not all of these videos, are about the most recent episode in the series, titled Hell. And in a lot of these videos, as displayed by the titles and thumbnails, people are now saying things like, UrbanSPOOK is good now, UrbanSPOOK redeemed. What I'm saying is that a lot of people are now under the impression that UrbanSPOOK is now peak, or they think that the most recent episode is a step in the right direction, while still not really believing the series as a whole is good. The most recent episode is the best episode by far, I completely agree with that. However, I'm here to say that UrbanSPOOK is not good now, and it has not been redeemed. Because it was peak all along. Now, I obviously need to explain myself, as the majority of people think that this series is absolutely deplorable, and I definitely understand why people would say that. I need to also try my absolute hardest to not sound like the average gore-enjoying edgelord, while explaining why this very edgy series is actually good, in my opinion. I also want to state that I'm not an avid analog horror fan. I've watched a few, but I'm not someone who dives deep into this kind of stuff, which I personally think will help my arguments in this video, because it's coming from the perspective of someone who is more of a casual enjoyer of this type of stuff. I will also say I generally don't find this stuff scary. Just before we start, I would like to mention that I do compare UrbanSPOOK to Walton Files a lot. It does make me seem like I'm painting Walton Files in a pretty negative light. So I'll say this now, in terms of overall story and how well it's written, Walton Files is probably better. However, in terms of actual pure horror and how creepy something is, UrbanSPOOK takes the cake in my opinion. So with that out of the way, what makes this analog horror good? My first point is that it actually makes you feel creeped out or extremely uncomfortable. I find it funny that people spin this as a negative point on the series, when if you look at the definition of horror, it quite literally says, an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. This is something that UrbanSPOOK does very well, although I will say it would be a bit ignorant for me to say that there aren't some questionable things in the series. Cutting two children in half and sewing them together, shoving a brick down their throat, and then making a painting called Fuck Toy Corey is quite brutal and a bit rough. But I will say this, it isn't real, and while it may seem like a horrific thing to come up with, which it very much is, when you really try to extend the nasty depths of what the human mind can come up with, you can get some pretty vile shit. This makes the series fall into the category of genuine horror, as you don't have a clue about what UrbanSPOOK may come up with next, and that can generate a lot of fear. I think a big counter-argument to this would be, it's just too much, or it's just for some cheap shock horror. My response to that would be, why does that make it bad? Shock horror is literally just another form of horror. I think labelling it as cheap shock horror isn't really a valid argument, because shock horror is a genre in of itself, and if you don't like shock horror as a whole, then of course I understand that this isn't for you, but just because it's a certain genre, I don't think that makes it bad. Some people may just think shock horror is cheap in general, but that's up to them. To truly make my point on that UrbanSPOOK series is actually creepy and uncomfortable, I want to compare it to a really popular analog horror, The Walton Files. Now, I've watched both of these with a friend. I can say now that we spent most of Walton Files laughing, and most of The Painter in uncomfortable silence. Now, this may be unfair, as The Walton Files did popularise the use of the dreaded germa-face syndrome, and it did it in a time before it was oversaturated, but man, it's absolutely hilarious when there's meant to be a creepy scene or a jump scare, and you get hit with some Photoshop melted germa-face with an audio glitch that sounds like the For Honor audio distortion. The Painter doesn't have germa syndrome, and the creator instead utilises paintings done by the killer as the main form of in-your-face spooky shit. That's what I'm going to call it. And something that people criticise that I personally think is really effective at building tension is how the Painter uses a lot of text on screen and even warns you about when you'll see the paintings. Rather than jump scaring you, the Painter actively prepares you for what you're about to see, which I personally think is great. Random jump scares usually don't work and can even come across as funny in the worst cases. By warning you, it gives you time to anticipate and dread what you're about to see before the paintings actually appear on screen. Even if you don't end up finding the paintings themselves scary, you may have felt a little fear in waiting for what you're about to see. And the heavy use of text throughout the series is also a plus for me. It leaves a lot to the imagination. The fear of the unknown is a very powerful thing. But hey, at the end of the day, the Walton Files germa faces, they're great, they're pretty funny. The scene was gruesome. Woo. Anyway, the later episodes of The Painter also contain some genuinely distressing stuff. That also plays into that sense of uncomfortability that I've been talking about. There are a couple of standout moments from the later episodes, such as the 911 phone call audio and the police body cam footage. The voice acting for the woman in the 911 phone call is absolutely amazing. It reminded me of those creepy videos you used to see about disturbing 911 calls. I genuinely would believe you if you showed me this audio and told me it was a real 911 call if I'd never heard it before. This shit sounds real. Take a listen to it. My words just don't give it enough justice.
Okay, Isabel, do you have anything to defend yourself with? The what? defend yourself with. Okay, listen, stay calm. I don't know what it is in your bathroom.
This brings me swiftly on to my next points about why I think the painter is good. My first point being that it seems like something that could genuinely be real. I'm not trying to be a hater, but comparison is a good way to make a point. The Walton Files have robots haunted by dead people. The painter just has two human beings that are going around murdering people in the most gruesome way possible. My point here is not that unrealistic stories are bad. They're definitely not. What I'm saying is UrbanSPOOK's story is based in reality, and can genuinely come across as something that can actually happen in the real world. Like I said, the story is based around what seems to be one but ends up being two serial killers, who are literally just human beings. This is made even better in the most recent episode with the police body cam footage. The police officer walks into a room and sees both the killers, and as one of them charges him, he's fucking capped in one shot from a pistol. When I was watching that, I fully expected the guy to no-sell the gunshot.
Don't care, still don't care.
But no, this guy is fucking dead after a single gunshot. I cannot fully describe how that just comes across as really cool in my opinion. These horrific, brutal serial killers are literally just human beings who can die in a single gunshot. Makes you think you could have passed by someone in your day-to-day life that plans on doing these things, or has done these things and nobody knows. I personally don't see many haunted robots in public very often because I don't live in London. My next point is that you sometimes need to go extreme to make something interesting. Even if you don't like the painter, you know it's at least interesting. That might be the reason why you're watching this video. What I'm saying here is that I think it's captivating to look at a story where the creator doesn't limit theirself in order to make others happy or to fit a status quo. The painter is an example of no limits. Now, I don't really know anything about the creator themselves. Apparently they said some naughty stuff, I think. I don't really care. But UrbanSPOOK just goes into their mind and thinks, what is the most disturbing, gruesome, and horrific thing I can come up with? And just puts it all out there for everyone to witness. You've got to respect it. I think you should allow storytellers to dive into sensitive and extremely uncomfortable topics. Because by claiming that certain areas are off limits and shouldn't be discussed, as they can be insensitive or offensive, you're making modern horror and storytelling in general less emotionally captivating and not as interesting. Does that mean that all mature stories should have an SA scene for the sake of having it, and gore because why the fuck not? No, it doesn't. But if the storyteller is trying to create a villain who genuinely disgusts you, why not make them do the most horrible thing a person could do? It's a surefire way of creating a scary, hateable character. It just makes me think, why should we baby people by not exposing them to storytelling that contains a grim reminder of how cruel people can be in their actions? So in conclusion, do I think that the painter is for everyone? Of course not. Definitely not. Do I find it hard to understand why people dislike it? No. I can easily see why people wouldn't like it. Their criticisms are valid in their own right, as I believe mine are. I made this video simply because I just like the series. It's genuinely eerie and intriguing. I was literally covering my TV screen when the CCTV camera footage started playing in that one episode, and like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not an avid analog horror fan. I just simply happened to watch a few of them, and the painter stood out like a 6-foot man in China. I personally believe it did its job as a horror series very well, and it left a big impression on me. If you disagree with me, cool. My opinion here may be unpopular, or it might just be an opinion that people don't often voice. It's controversial, and it's not perfect. It has flaws, but I like it the most out of any analog horror I've seen. Go and watch The Painter, and come to your own conclusions. Don't just blindly agree with what I'm saying, or what others have said. Enjoy what you like. You may end up hating it, or you may like it. Find out for yourself, and I just say keep an open mind. Anyway, that's all. Goodbye.